Now we come to one of my favorite topics, the topic of negotiation. I love this one. Now, a lot of people think that salary negotiation starts after the final interview, but that is absolutely not the case. In fact, I would make the argument that the negotiation starts at the moment that you put the position description together. But let's leave that aside. It certainly starts at the time when you're having an initial telephone conversation with somebody that you're interested in recruiting. Now, the basic idea here is to remain vague and to push the conversation about compensation back towards the end of the initial phone screen. And I want to qualify that for just a moment, because if you really have no idea whether the person is even in the range for the position that you're recruiting for, and if you need to find that information out in order to prevent yourself from wasting time, then you may need to ask questions about that earlier. But in terms of positioning yourself for a strong negotiation, for hiring somebody and for getting them really excited about joining your company, it is better to push that conversation off to later in the conversation. Now, so what are some of the principles that are involved in a negotiation or in a first phone call and gathering information about compensation? First of all, remain vague to start with. Don't give away compensation information if you're asked. Try to push it back. Sometimes you'll find yourself boxed in and you'll need to, and if that's the case, then remain vague. Keep the ranges large. Maybe say that you don't have all of the information. Whatever you can do to kind of push it back is going to be helpful to you. Now, the other thing to do is to start by selling the company instead of selling the job. And the reason for that is that when you sell the company, you're keeping a focus on the vision. When you're selling the job, you're starting to create a checklist in the person's mind where they're going to kind of say, maybe even subconsciously, what is this worth? What will they pay me to do this job? So the more specific you get about the job, the more you're actually closer to having a conversation about compensation. Next step is to focus on your candidate. And that would be asking them questions and interviewing them, and we're going to talk about that in the next section. But for now, focusing on the company, focusing on the candidate is going to push the compensation conversation to later in the call. Then focus on responsibilities for the role, not the title. The reason why is that the title connotes compensation. It also sets people thinking, well, if the title is a director, it's going to pay X amount. If it's a manager, it pays Y amount. If it's a VP, it pays Z amount, that kind of thing. So stay away from the title, focus on responsibilities. Also, instead of selling compensation, sell the career case overall. Hopefully that's clear from an earlier lesson. Now, what's also really important is that you ask for compensation first. Now, when I do this, I think of myself as kind of like a leopard or something, hidden in the grass. They never see it coming. Maybe Columbo, if you want to try a Columbo. My favorite Columbo line is, well, ma'am, if you weren't in Mexico, what is that sombrero doing in the back seat of your car? And I just love that one because, what Columbo does is he puts the most important question to the end of interviewing his suspect. And he catches them by surprise because the suspect, in the case of Columbo, doesn't see it coming. And then provides information in a candid way, which is what you want. You want to catch this information in a candid way. So the way that I do this is I make it a surprise. I may do something like, tell me about the things that you're interested in that you need in order to make a move. What would be your ideal job? I'm trying to stay away from compensation. What are the really important components of the job to you? And then they kind of go through it and say, oh, that's great. I hear that you want an X and you want a Y and you want a Z. That's really terrific. And then I'll pause. And then I'll say something like, tell me about compensation. Or this one's even better. talk to me about compensation. Great opener for this topic. Talk to me about compensation. And the reason why is that it's broad, it's open-ended, so they can talk about what they've earned in the past. They can talk about what they're looking for in the future. They can potentially dodge the question, which will tell you something about the mentality of the person that you're interviewing, which is important information for you to have in terms of making a decision about the candidate. It also, when you ask that way, it's sort of casual. And that's really how you want to approach the beginning of a negotiation. And frankly, if you can, through the entire negotiation, so the topic of compensation, and it's the way that you want to approach negotiation overall if you can. So you kind of slip that in. Talk to me about compensation. Get them to talk about it. Make sure that they're interested in the role. They may ask you about compensation. Again, remain vague, try to give a large range, say you don't know, dodge the topic in whatever way you can. Being reasonable, if you've asked for compensation, you're going to need to provide them information. It's only fair, so you should be ready for that. But be ready for it. I mean, have a line that you like to use that will allow you to give them information without giving them too much information. Then what you can always do, and by the way, only give that information if asked, and never give it before you are asked. Never give it before you gather the information if it's possible at all to avoid it. If they don't ask about compensation, don't give it. Finally, if you get a very vague answer when you initially ask for compensation, before you get off the phone is a good time to reiterate it. You might say, I heard that you were interested in making $150,000 a year. Tell me, what's your compensation now? So that's a way to slip it in. Or they might have said, I'm earning $200,000, and then you move on, and then later in the conversation you could come back with something like, I heard that you were making $200,000. Could you tell me how that's broken down in terms of base and bonus? And do that separately at the end, and it gives you the ability to gather more information. This is a topic that we actually put on a 2-hour webinar about. And that is something that I don't know if we're going to make it available here with this as a bonus, or if it's going to be separate or whatever. But if this is a topic that you're interested in, please get in touch with me. I'd be really interested to hear what your thoughts are, to help you through this conversation if you'd like. And you can either write some comments. I'm not exactly sure how it works here, but certainly you could send me an email. And my email address is jason, JASON, @flycastllc.com. Thanks.